No, it's the sound is muted. Thank you, Leo. Let me go get my headphones. They're in the auditorium on the camera. Yeah. Yeah. Do you want him to wear a mic? Does he need one? It wouldn't hurt. Let me grab it. You're the best. I give you my team. Sorry, that was me.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to, well, this is about resilience, right? Moving from different sections to another, it's okay. So, on behalf of the King's Hour Committee, I'd like to thank you and welcome you to our last King's Hour of the year. So this is our 4th King's Hour, and my name is Joe Henry. I'm the Dean of Students here at King's. The King's Hour, as you know, is a series of culturally and academically engaging events of common interest to the entire King's community. These take the form of lectures, discussions, or performances on relevant and timely issues of importance to our community and society as a whole. Although the conversation begins here in this room, it extends beyond this classroom and into our community, and we look forward to seeing that continue. It's now my pleasure to introduce the 4th year psychology student, Kendra Hardy, who is also our King's Academic Mentoring Coordinator, who will introduce our speaker for today. Kendra.
Hi everyone, so thanks for making your way over here. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on our speaker. Tim Clydesdale is a professor of sociology at the College of New Jersey. A first-generation college graduate, he earned his bachelor's degree at Wheaton College in Illinois. and completed his PhD at Princeton University. After 2 years of teaching at Gordon College, Clydesdale joined the College of New Jersey, where he has also served as department chair, faculty senator, and faculty representative to the Board of Trustees. He's been invited to speak about his research at more than 50 colleges, universities, and scholarly associations across the United States. His research on post-high school transition culminated in the first year out, Understanding American Teens After High School. His evaluation of an 88-campus Lilly Endowment Initiative, The Purposeful Graduate, Why Colleges Must Talk to Students About Vocation, was published in May 2015 by the University of Chicago Press. Presently, he's wrapping up a collaborative project on the changing spirituality of emerging adults that included a national survey of 20-somethings in America, in-depth interviews with more than 200 young adults, and an ethnographic study of 11 congregations that attract scores of young adults. The co-authored book from that study is titled The 20-Something Soul, Understanding the Religious and Spiritual Lives of American Young Adults. So today we're going to have Ms. Dr. Clydesdale come and talk, and then after he speaks, we're going to have some time for questions from the audience, and those will be moderated by Joe Henry. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Clydesdale.
Thank you all for coming. It's good to be here. It's good to be in London, Ontario, and for me to get a chance to see a bit of this section of Canada. I've been told by my wife that this is where we're going to move if Donald Trump gets elected president of the United States. So I hope you're all ready for a tidal wave of immigration northward if that tragic event should happen. Well, I'm here to talk about something I think is important to every member of a college and university environment, students, faculty, and staff. And so I'm delighted that there's so many students here in the room today, because I want you to be thinking about whether this conversation and these sorts of programs that I'm going to describe is something that would be a conversation you would want to have happen here at this university, and what you would like it to look like. And similarly, for faculty and staff, I want you to think about really why is it that you got into higher education in the first place? What drew you here? And what is it that makes your work most meaningful? And how can you have a conversation that really supports that? So I've got good news to share, and it's good news because there's an awful lot of things that are troubling news in higher education today, and a lot of challenges. Now, when I think about higher education, I mean, for me, it was really a wonderful time in my life. I think about one of my favorite places on campus, and it was a space kind of like this. Not surprising, that's where someone who ended up getting their doctorate would end up enjoying the library, say, as opposed to the local pub. Nevertheless, I think something's happened to us in higher education. I feel like we've been dragged out of the comfortable chairs that we're used to, and we've been thrown into a boxing ring. And in that boxing ring, we've been getting hammered by a number of important and troublesome issues. Cost, certainly, and competition for students, that's something that affects a lot of colleges and universities. The unbundling of higher education, the ways in which people can earn university credits outside of universities has become a challenge. The decline in the number of high school graduates, again, leads to more competition for those graduates. Even after students leave, there's concern about them being underemployed, not really using the university credentials they've worked so hard to obtain, and being lost in transition, kind of wandering for most of their 20s, trying to find a path forward. There's, of course, ongoing complaints about administrative bloat and how that seems to be the section of universities that keeps growing, and of professors who seem to have the best part-time jobs with full-time salaries in the universe, and so that's an ongoing complaint. And then there's some very serious issues. Academically Adrift is the title of a book that was based on a study of the collegiate literacy assessment. And it found that after 3 semesters of university education, just a full 45% of students showed no gains in critical thinking during that time. And this was a shock to a lot of people in the United States when that finding first came out. And yet, subsequent research has confirmed that there's an awful lot of folks just kind of gliding through higher education with classes that don't demand much of them and not doing much work and nevertheless completing the credits and completing their degrees. Also quite serious are the rates of alcohol abuse. You can think about that given that St. Patrick's Day is tomorrow. And we can think about if there's going to be any of that happening. And of course that is often bound up with even more serious issues of sexual assault. And the rates at which that are happening are intense. So these are some of the things we've been getting hammered with in this boxing ring that we've been thrown into. That we really aren't thinking that that was part of what we signed up for when we got into higher education. So I want to share the good news. And the good news, I'll just hit it point by point like this, and then I'm going to talk through how it is. So the good news is that when colleges and universities meaningfully talk about their organizational histories, and that is everything about them, their particularity is actually a strength. Okay? It's a strength because in these conversations, it's good to have a place from which you start talking about these issues. And what are the issues? It's conversations, sustained conversations with students about questions of purpose, right? What is the purpose for higher education? What is the purpose that you are looking for in your lives as students? And the result is really a number of things that are very good. One is an overall rise in campus engagement. But the other result is that graduates really set off on a trajectory that's notably different than those that haven't had a chance to participate in these conversations. So what I'm asking campuses to do is something that isn't like a secondary or a third thing. I'm asking them actually to be missional, to be do something that really all campuses will talk about citizenship of their students. They'll talk about students that are productive and making a useful contribution to their region and to their nation, right? And to do so with broader inclusivity than they may have ever done so before. That inclusivity includes religion and spirituality. That's often some people feel like we need to push to the side, perhaps, in higher education. But it is core to many people's identity. And therefore, it deserves to be a part of the conversation. But I'm not asking people to do this on their own. I'm actually asking you to look at scores of colleges that have done this and join now hundreds of colleges that are actually involved in this work right now in the United States. So how did this begin? Well, it began with one of the largest foundations, private foundations in the world, the Lilly Endowment. Lilly Endowment gets its money from the Lilly Pharmaceuticals. The original founder, Eli Lilly, of the endowment said he wanted to support three things in turn. He wanted to support community development, education, and religion. And what he meant by religion a century ago when he wrote this was Christianity. So this foundation, its religion division, was led by these two gentlemen. Both of them have PhDs in religion, one in theology, the other in church history. They became convinced that the thing we can do most to help religion in the contemporary world is make sure that the people who are leading it, who are trained for it, are in fact as broadly and as richly educated as possible. Then something very important happened, and I'm talking here in the late 1990s, was the bull market. So this idea that would have normally brought about a request for proposals, it might have offered, say, $500,000 to a campus to think about how to foster this conversation, became $2 million, because if money comes into an endowment, it has to go out at the rate at which it's going in. They're not banks. They're not designed to keep storing the money. They have to give money away at a certain rate. And they launched something called PTEV, which was programs for the theological exploration of vocation. So let me tell you a little bit about this initiative and then some of the things that I found. All right. So what did it do? It invited church-affiliated colleges and universities to develop programs to foster these conversations about questions of meaning and purpose. And in doing so, to think about their religious underpinnings, which is the theology of vocation. It also asked people to be creative in their programming and in their creativity to draw from their campus's tradition. Whatever that tradition might be. That tradition might be Methodism, that tradition might be Pentecostalism, that tradition might be Roman Catholicism. And it offered initially some even money to figure out how to best do this with a planning grant of $50,000 and then $2 million to implement these programs between 2000 and 2008. There are 800 religiously affiliated colleges and universities in the United States. 400 of them apply, which is a pretty remarkable rate because they all like to march to the beat of their own drummer. 88 of them receive funding. So this is what I'll be reporting on. This is the data that I'll be sharing with you. So I visited or studied 26 of these campuses, interviewed hundreds of faculty and staff on them, and hundreds of students and alumni. One of the things I did is, just to make sure this was really having the effect that people said, is I did something called panel interviews. Now, if you're from the social sciences and you've got a methods course, you know what that is, but if you're not, I'll simply explain it. Panel interviews are where you interview people at one point in time, and then after a period of time, you re-interview those same people again. It's a very good way of kind of tracking change over time. So I interviewed 60 people across these 26 campuses, interviewed them for about 90 minutes, and then more than a year after they graduate, I went back and interviewed them again. And to make sure I was actually seeing something that was the result of this programming work, I had 65 students who were from campuses that didn't have these awards that I studied as well. So I have some comparison there. Finally, I followed that up with a web survey on just 8 campuses, faculty and staff, students, as well as alumni. They were able to get it out and had over 2,000 respondents to a web survey. So that's the data. The title of my book is The Purposeful Graduate, Why Colleges Must Talk to Students About Vocation. And so one of the questions I get asked a lot is, well, what do I mean by vocation? Well, what I mean by vocation is the broadest possible exploration of the ideas of purpose, meaning, calling. Yes, including these ideas, religious underpinnings. So for some, this is going to mean listening to the voice within. Okay? That's one way some people think about it. To others, it means hearing humanity's cry for compassion and justice. And to others, it might mean devoting your resources and skills to the service of God and humankind. All right? So there's a range of things that people can see as vocation. But it's about something more than career and job. It's really about the sort of life that you want to live and the sort of impact you want to make with your life, and thinking about that in an intentional way. So let me tell you about 3 campuses that had these programs, and just some of the creative ways that they implemented these. You'll see that creativity was very much encouraged. So first campus I'm going to tell you about is Richborough University, which, by the way, if there's anybody here from IRB, this isn't a picture of Richborough University, or I'm not divulging any of the photos you see are just simply Google images that I downloaded. I'm not revealing names of institutions or interviewees. At Richborough University, it was the largest category of campuses that received these grants, which was it was a clearly church-affiliated campus, but it had a religiously heterogeneous population. So in that sense, it's an institution. These are institutions similar to King University. What they decided to focus on was a comprehensive program for sophomores. And for a lot of good reasons that I can't go into right now, sophomore year is absolutely the best time to kind of have this conversation. The first year if someone is at university, they're largely consumed with trying to figure out a lot of different things like, what does it mean to be a college student? Where can I get my laundry done? How do I afford these books? Who are my friends, especially? And how are my friends changing? Where do I fit? And so those conversations those concerns tend to push other things to the side, to the periphery. But sophomore year is a year when people start reflecting a little bit more about what is it that I want to be? Do I want to, and it tends to come up this way, do I want to be this major anymore? Do I want this to be my degree? But usually that's just the tip of an iceberg of a much deeper question of who do I want to be? And so they created a residential program for sophomores. The Jesuit priest who was the director of campus ministry, said, we're going to put this in a hall, and there is a hall on this campus that had no longer been used as a residential hall. It had actually been taken over by the Department of Admissions, so there were offices upstairs, and they had a beautiful lounge that overlooked the quad and then a lake. The Jesuit director of ministry went to the dean of admissions and said, you know, if we get this grant, would you be willing to kind of move out and let us have this space again as a hall? And the dean of admissions said, thinking, well, you know, there's no chance this guy's going to get a $2 million grant. Sure, yeah, we'll do that. So that summer, they had to pack up, move out, and they did some light renovations to that hall. They converted back into living space. And in this large lounge that they had, they really wanted to focus on the idea of intentional community. And they wanted people to spend time in this residence hall, in this lounge, talking to each other. Because the nature of residence life today is if you actually walk into a residential hall, you'll largely see doors shut. And you'll see a blue light kind of coming out from underneath, because students are less spending face-to-face time interacting in residence hall, and they're more actually interacting with each other through social media and other forms of media. And so they're using screens for interaction. Well, they wanted to kind of change that. So they said, we're going to establish a basic principle, not a hard and fast rule, but a principle that if you're in your room, as much as you're able to, keep your door open so you can socialize with other people on the hall. And come down to the lounge. And one of the things they had in the lounge that was a great enticement was they had a free soda pop fountain right there. All you can, I mean, so and I remember when I was like, I think in 3rd grade, I voted for someone to be class president because they promised us soda pop in the water fountains. We never got it, but there was something very, you know, especially if you're a college student, that access to caffeine and sugar like that is very enticing. They would have regular weekly meals there. And in those weekly meals, they would invite perhaps guests on campus, faculty, or staff to come and share what they call their vocation story. The vocation story is a very straightforward thing. It's just simply telling how it was that you came to be doing what you're doing at this moment in this place. Who were the key people? What were the key moments? These are very human stories. And people enjoy listening to these stories. But they're also stories about meaning. They're stories about purpose, stories about a sense of calling that people will have at times. So they would have these sorts of conversations. They also met together in small groups. So everyone in the residence hall, you have to apply to get into this residence hall. You have to complete an application. And then if selected, you agree to participate in a couple things. One of the things were weekly small groups. And so these small groups would be 10 undergraduates combined with a faculty, staff, or an alumni mentor. And they would meet together and talk about issues of purpose and meaning, why students are where they are, what sort of impact they want to make with their lives, reflecting on this in a deeper sort of way. These became very powerful conversations. And so those were two of the kind of key aspects of this residence hall. There was also classes that were taught by faculty affiliates. And there were a dozen faculty affiliates. You had to take one class each semester, and the classroom was actually in the residence hall to really facilitate that living learning community. And it could be anything from kind of great history of Europe and some of the ways in which various key figures in Europe had their own sense of calling. So it was themed that way, to a seminar on the ethics of accounting. Right? So there's a wide range of coursework that would be relevant to this. So that was one of the things they had there. There's also service programs that they could participate in together. And there were bands that would leave every weekend with various people from this community, from this residence hall, and serve the community. And this was a really astounding program. I got to visit it. By the time I had gotten there, the admission tours were bringing people through, telling them about this residence hall. It was the most desired residence hall on campus, and not just because it had the nicest view out of its lounge, but because there was something very powerful that was happening in this hall in terms of the impact that it was having on students. And again, this wasn't necessarily something that was for just the Catholic students on campus, although some of them found their way there. It was a hall that was for anyone that wanted to think seriously about these questions. Well, that was one example. Let me tell you about a different place. So Phi Beta College is what I call a virtually unaffiliated campus. And about 20 or so of the campuses in this initiative were like this. So technically, they were non-sectarian. It had a historic affiliation. It used to have a chapel on campus. Literally removed the steeple, turned the inside of it into a black box theater. There was still a chaplain left on the staff, but was somewhere down in a basement, somewhere in an office, and really didn't have much of a presence on campus. So when the request for proposals went to this school, the president gave it not to the chaplain, because that would have been the kiss of death, gave it rather to a professor of religion who was an outstanding scholar and an outstanding teacher. And she said that here's the thing that in this environment really matters, which is what does it mean to have meaningful work, right? Because that's something I think everybody wants. People want meaningful work. They don't want work that's meaningless. They want work that's meaningful. It's going to make a contribution in some way to the world and hopefully bring a sense of fulfillment as well. So they she created a sophomore course called Work and Meaning. I sat in on the class, absolutely fascinating. She was an incredible instructor. And so, we did everything from in that class, they read the book of Ecclesiastes to works by Christopher Lasch. They read essays on the soul of capitalism. They spent a weekend living on a poverty budget. They visited a job training program for people who are unemployed. They really kind of got a sense of what is work, and then what is work that's meaningful, and how do these things connect. Once you completed that course, then you were able to connect to a number of additional resources. This was the Gateway course, and so there was various service programs from there. There were internship programs. There are also stipended internship programs. So if someone wanted to pursue work in a nonprofit organization, but would have normally needed a stipend in order to, be able to stay there for the summer because they need money from work otherwise, this awarded, I think it was a $1,500 stipend or maybe a $2,000 stipend for the summer so that they could work full-time in a nonprofit. So that was a nice program they had there. And they had leadership programs as well that went out from that. The faculty weren't ignored in this initiative because one of the things that the director said is that teaching is a calling too. Good teaching matters, and this is an institution that considers teaching to be very, very important. And so had something called a teaching buffet. The director said, if you feed them, they will come. And there was perhaps some truth to that. Every 2 weeks there was a buffet made available, and then some member of the campus who was doing something innovative with their pedagogy that they would then give a talk for 20 minutes and share what it was. And the faculty together began to really enjoy this because it really reaffirmed why teaching mattered and why they chose to become educators in higher education. One other thing I would describe right in here is there was nice support for upper level service learning. Now I like service learning very much, but a lot of service learning that I've seen tends to be more at the kind of entry level sort of stuff. So someone might help clean up a park, for example, or they might help serve a meal to folks who are hungry or poor. And this is good service. I'm not putting that down. But one of the things it doesn't do is it doesn't have students use their skills that they're working so hard to get. In this particular one, I heard a number of stories like this. I'll tell you an example of one. It was a computer science professor. Had a junior seminar. And so what they did is they partnered with two different groups. I'll just tell you about one of the partnerships with the local school district. Local school district was, like many local public school districts, struggling. It had 4 different computer systems. A couple of them were still using literally terminals connected to a mainframe. None of them worked with each other. Students weren't able to get the information they needed. Parents weren't able to get the information they needed. It was very difficult to get just even college applications done, recommendation letters and all those things. So the students in this seminar partnered with the school district and they wrote a web-based front end. And then what that web-based did is it worked with all 4 of these systems. And then when they were done, now it was very easy for students to be able to find out information about colleges, to request transcripts and those sorts of things. So one, it was very good for the school district. Number two, it was one of the best things that this computer science instructor had ever done. Loved it, one of the most meaningful things for him as an educator. And for the students, it was a fantastic use of their skills in the service of humankind. I mean, so it really drew a number of things together that were very, very useful. I'll tell you about one more example and then talk a little bit about the effects of this. So a school I call the College of Douglas and Du Bois is a campus that is a culturally distinctive campus. This particular one had an enthusiastic black church affiliation. Now, in contrast to the previous school, when the request for proposals went to the president of this institution, she immediately passed it off to her chaplain, because at a historically black campus in the United States, there are few positions more prominent on campus, aside maybe from the president, than the chaplain. And so the chaplain developed a program to draw people in. Here's the situation she had. She knew how to convey the idea of vocation and calling and purpose. Okay, that language isn't really disappeared from African Americans in the United States, but she wasn't getting very many people coming to the chapel, and so she explained her logic like this. She said, "You know, Tim, the heartbeat of youth is music. If we could get a really good gospel choir, we could draw people to the chapel service. Once they're there, believe me, I know how to, relay a message there." Well, by the time I got to hear this group, they got the grant. She hired a professional gospel musician who was an alumnus. Now, I have musicians in my family, love them dearly. Perhaps you have musicians, or there's some musicians in the room. But there's one thing I've noticed about them. They tend to be perfectionists. And you're not done rehearsing until they say you're done. So they hired this gospel musician. He would start rehearsals 3 nights a week, start at 8, sometimes not ending till 1 in the morning. But when I got to hear them, it was the most phenomenal choir I have ever heard live. 40 voices strong, in addition to a 6-piece band. Students referred to it as a bomb choir. Now, I was so clueless, I had to ask what that meant. And they said it's a choir that's so good, it will blow you away. And it did. I listened to this choir sing, and I listened to a soprano hit notes so high, I thought the stained glass was going to shatter behind her. Well, what did the effect of this was? Well, they went from about less than 200 people attending Sunday chapel services to more than 800 attending each week. They started a midweek chapel service that began to draw nearly 300 people to it. And along with this choir singing, they had both the chaplain as well as guest preachers come and talk about what it meant to have a calling and a sense of purpose that's going to govern and direct their lives. One other important thing they did here at this school is they partnered with their athletic teams. The athletic director, I remember meeting her. She herself was an outstanding athlete who had made it to the Final Four, so I introduced myself, said hello, looking up at her. She was a towering presence. She was absolutely convinced that athletes are ambassadors for your campus. For good or bad, they are your kind of key representatives. And so the director of athletics said every varsity athlete is going to come to a leadership institute that the director of athletics combined with the chaplain ran. And they really spent some time really hammering home what it meant to have a sense of purpose and calling and character and to represent the institution. So that Leadership Institute got launched as well as some campus-wide service activities. So what were the effects of this? Those are just 3 examples. There's 88 campuses that did this. I can tell you many more, just to give you a sense of the range of how campuses did this. One of the effects was retention, which is that those campuses that had these programs actually had more people stay from the first year to second and stay to complete their degrees than those campuses that did not have it. And I did that with a random sample of other campuses to compare. I do have an asterisk here. This asterisk is there kind of like Barry Bonds' home run record. When you start engaging this question and issue with students, it is a little bit like touching an electrified third grade. And at one institution, I had heard of a senior who had spent his January term in Calcutta working with Mother Teresa's organization. He came back the day before classes were to begin, packed up everything in his room, withdrew from the college, and returned to Calcutta to work there for another year. His graduation rate was not going to be better, okay? Now the story ends, he did come back after that year and did ultimately finish his final semester and complete his degree. But I just put that asterisk up there to let you know, this is not a retention program per se, but it is a program that can have positive effects on students. The more direct effects, and I'm going to talk about this more in a minute, is on life trajectories. What are the ways in which people, young adults, form their trajectory as they leave? What are the default trajectories people are on? What are the more intentional trajectories that young adults can have? So some powerful effects there. There's also some powerful effects in social norms. A lot of the times young adults pulled together don't always have, unfortunately, the best social norms. The norms can be a little bit more about having a laugh and having quite a bit to drink, and not so much about study. But the interesting thing is that there are pockets, there are certain programs on the campuses, certain co-curricular groups that began to take these questions very seriously and themselves began to talk about what it meant to have a calling. I remember listening to one young woman speak during a focus group and just call out and praise the student across from her because the previous night they had both been at a tutoring situation and this one young woman had been working with a special needs child who was very, very distraught. And she just spent like 45 minutes and got that child calmed down and got that child, focused on what they were trying to do. And it was such a powerful moment. And so the one young woman said across the table to the others, you really have a calling. You have a gift in working with children, special needs children. That is a wonderful thing. And so those were the sorts of norms that began to emerge there. And anything that's positive social norms, I think, is something we should support. Lastly, and it's been great to hear the term resilience used here so much, but the thing I noticed most, where this really made a difference, is when I looked at the alumni. When I looked at the alumni, it was astounding, the difference. Those students that had spent time during their college, university years thinking about these questions, thinking about these issues, had remarkably different trajectories after college than those that didn't. They were stunningly intentional and resilient. See, because the story of life after college is really a story about setbacks, about disappointments, and about how you deal with those and move forward in a positive way. And it was stunning how those who had spent time in these programs were able to deal with those hurdles and find a way forward compared to those that hadn't spent time in them, who tended to have much shorter. Sorry, that 5-minute warning came up much sooner than I thought. I thought I had 40 minutes. I must have not heard that right. Okay, then you see otherwise. So, what is it that students said? 84% confirmed that discussion, reflection, reading about purpose or calling had been helpful or very helpful to them. 74% said they had a faculty member with whom they had good and valuable conversations about calling, vocation, or purpose. And that's compared to, say, 41%, 46% from national data in the US that said they had a faculty member that cared about them, with whom they could have these sorts of conversations. So significant change that way. 81% reported that their campus purpose exploration program encouraged me to see and serve the needs of others. 67% said it helped them identify their skills and talents, and a third said it led them to alter their life plans. I'm going to skip over some contrasting points here. All right, so I talked about trajectories. In general, students are on one of two default cultural trajectories. The first of these I call the individualist one. That trajectory, a cultural trajectory, is basically a vision for what the good life is. Where are we going, right? And that one says, well, the good life is individual fulfillment, personal intimacy, and material consumption. Okay, that's what the good life is. And the majority of at least young adults in the U.S. would be on that trajectory, the individualist trajectory. There's a second trajectory, the traditionalist says, no, I think you're missing something. It's not all just about self and self-achievement. There's responsibilities that one can step into, and deep meaning is found there within stepping into roles within families and work and communities and even within congregations. Well, the first thing I would say is that individualists hit brick walls. A number of reasons why. Those sort of high-paying jobs are in rather scarce supply. Secondly, employers don't tend to design jobs for people's personal fulfillment. They tend to design jobs because they want something done. Debt tends to accumulate from that sort of lifestyle rather quickly. And when you're an avowed individualist, that doesn't tend to work very well with long-term intimacy in a relationship. But in the same way, traditionalists hit brick walls. One, because home is not the haven that we think it is. There are just as many challenges among traditionalists that way. And similarly, communities are elective, that people vote with their feet. They leave. And so you can pour yourself into one of these communities and find, nevertheless, that the factories close down as they move to the global south and the global east, that the downtowns are empty as well. This is actually all predicted in a book some 30 years ago called Habits of the Heart. It talked about how commitment would be fading. So it's time to recalibrate. And the best time to have this sort of recalibration is during the college years. To establish something I call an interdependent trajectory. A trajectory that's marked by purposeful, productive living and local citizenship. But this is not something that you default into. You have to intentionally opt for this. It is an intentional choice to get to. To do it, you need a few things. One, you're going to need a common vocabulary. I found it doesn't matter what the vocabulary is, but you do need to have a common way in which you're going to talk about these things on college. Some campuses use the terms lines of character. Some campuses use terms vocation. Some campuses use terms a life of meaning. Some campuses talk about meaningful work. It doesn't matter what the phrase is, the terminology. It simply means that you adopt some terms so that you can start talking about these in common and get some traction. Secondly, you need to have a space for young adults to talk to each other, okay, to reflect. This is not something, there's times where one wants to kind of head away to the mountaintop and reflect on one's own, but more often, it's very important for people to talk to each other about these questions, like the two girls across the table talking and affirming their skills in each other. And it helps to have a mentoring community. That mentoring community on a college, university campus tends to be your faculty and staff. And these programs had to move through faculty and staff. They did it a number of ways, from retreats for faculty, to new employee orientation programming, to reading groups, to 10-week seminars. For faculty to get back in touch with why did they get into higher education in the first place. For staff to be seen as the educators and respected as the educators that they are and the contributions that they make. And faculty and staff said that these questions are just as relevant to them as they are to young adults. Because the idea of vocation, the idea of purpose isn't a once and done consideration. It's a set of questions that we return to again and again as we think about having a life of impact. 86% of faculty said these programs positively impacted their own work. 90% of staff said the same. 85% said it deepened my appreciation for the mission of the school. 93% of staff said the same. 75% said it helped me hone my own sense of vocation, calling, or purpose. 84% of faculty said the same thing. I don't have enough time to talk through the alumni points. Let me just simply say, I'll skip through these quotes here. Of those who spent time exploring purpose or calling, they voiced longer-term perspectives than those that hadn't. They show less concern for how their lives compare to others. There's an awful lot of that goes on, facilitated by social media, the ways in which people compare themselves to each other. Of course, one always puts one's best self or even fictional self forward there, but there was less concern. They sought out the advice of mentors. What most young adults tend to do is talk to other young adults. On some things that's good, but sometimes it helps to actually talk to someone a little bit older to get some traction forward, so a little more life experience. They demonstrated more resilience to setbacks and had more other directed goals, something I call holy grit, right? Positive psychologists talk about grit, which is extreme persistence in the pursuit of one's goals. But one's goals can be anything when it comes to grit. Holy grit is upward or outward directed goals, right? Not as much self-oriented goals like I want to make $3 million by the time I'm 30, but rather I want to impact the world in these sorts of ways. They expressed more realistic expectations about life after college. I was very surprised by that. I honestly thought talking to people about big, lofty questions would make idealistic students more idealistic. But every one of these programs partnered these times of conversation with service. And so students actually had a very real expectation of what was going to come to them after college. So they're actually more realistic. Many of these students made decisions that moved them closer to long-term goals, and they demonstrated more balance in their everyday lives. So what is college about? Okay, in the end, what college is about is purposeful, productive, meaningful college graduates who are good citizens and contributing to their communities. Thank you for your attention.
We have time for a few questions, so I'd like to open the floor, but if anyone has a question, I have a prepared question to get us started. I always say educators should be prepared for this.
Here's one right here.
Graham Rod from the Public District. There's a comment on that question. You mentioned moving after something's too fast because we're building a wall.
Yeah, you better build a wall. There'll be an awful lot of us coming up this way.
I want to ask about parents. You study faculty, students, and alumni. My purely anecdotal experience at our open houses and the like is that parents are very interested in having their students gravitate towards programs that are vocational in a narrow sense, in the sense of very career-oriented and that more materialistic trajectory. Do you have a sense of how to draw parents into these discussions?
That's a great question. Campuses were largely focused on the students, their faculty, and staff in these conversations. One of the things that I heard some campuses do, though, is on these days where you have new students and their parents there, is first ask parents kind of to raise their hand. Of those that went to university, how many really had a great experience there, really learned a lot, found something very valuable? You can see the hands go up and say, now leaving your hands up for a minute, all of you who went. How many of you are now working in the field that you expected to be working in when you were a college student? And it's a stunning thing because more than half of the hands will drop at that point in time. And it drives home the point that college is about more than just preparation for a job. It's about preparation for life, and that there are many ways that one can begin to do it. That was, there's a lot of challenges to doing this sort of thing with parents. One of the places that, another place I thought of, there's a test that the Gallup organization does, Now Discover Your Strengths, and was used quite a bit on many of these campuses. One of them offered it to parents as an option. And so during their orientation week, parents got a chance to take the strengths test and then have a general session about what the results were. And that facilitated a conversation, one, about for parents being self-aware of what their own strengths are, but also then seeing their kids, a very important differentiation moment, where they could begin to see in their kids a set of strengths that maybe is different from their own, and that seeing whether those strengths really fit for perhaps the way some parents might be pushing their kids. But thank you very much.
Sure. I actually had one question, somewhat followed the same thing. First, thank you very much for kind of my expectation coming in was a bit more skewed. But I'd say it's kind of floored, and I'm very impressed in the fact that it introduces a new variable. And that what I mean is last semester came off a great article by Mark Kingwell, Intellectual and Democracy. Okay. And it was about the idea where, again, it's how do we kind of preserve the higher education as being higher education, not just a sort of stable of acquiring a market advantage.
Right. Right, that's a great term. Is there more?
No, I was just gonna say, how, like, no one's seeing this, it has that same potential, at least if anything, as a new variable, but the question also becomes, how do we provide that? How do we actually secure that in an economy that demands otherwise?
Here's what I think is ultimately the bottom line that colleges and universities need to show. They need to show graduates that are purposeful, right? They're graduates that are productively engaged and purposeful in their lives and have a sense of drive, as opposed to young adults that one of the other words that's been used is tinkerers, who spend a little bit of time doing this, a little bit of time of that, and nothing's really kind of building with any sense of momentum. And I would say that if colleges and universities were able to increase, seriously leverage up the number of purposeful graduates they had, that would begin to very quickly start to silence some of those things. My estimate is that really about 2 to 3% of students nationally in the US are purposeful in this way. And they become the people who are the poster alums. You put them on your alumni magazine and things like that, doing great stuff. But that you could have, I estimate about 20 to 25% of students could be much more powerfully drawn into this if you use the right sort of levers to draw them in. And if you have 25% of students who are behaving more like that 1 out of 50 student, 25 out of 100, I think that would be a powerful effect. First, it would make teaching a lot more rewarding for the faculty staff. It would make learning a lot more rewarding for other students that are sharing this way. And it would begin to get more people off your back saying, you know, what is your contribution as a college or university to the society? Because you keep having wave after wave of these really purposeful sorts of young people graduating. I don't know if that fully addresses your question, but that's part of what.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
One question.
Sure.
Yeah. Where would we start?
Where would you start?
Where would you start with the program? For example, at King's, we're primarily commuter with only about 350 people in residence. So you're a commuter campus. Where would you start with a program like this to change the channel a little bit on the conversation that is out there around about the job as opposed to the meaningful life piece? Now,
Right.
being a job has to be part of having a meaningful life, but where would
Yeah.
we start?
I think there's a couple places that you could begin that I think are useful. I do think that that one course that I described at Phi Beta College called Work and Meaning, courses like that would meet requirements, degree requirements, but engage this issue would be a great place to begin to seed this. I think in student life, one idea would be for students that were interested in this, to perhaps be able to go away for a weekend. Some of the retreats and programs like that tended to be very powerful in their effects. Students enjoyed the chance to be able to talk to other students and have faculty and staff mentors there as well talking about this. I think that would be a great place to begin. And then among faculty and staff, I think the important thing there is to challenge faculty and staff really at their own game. Give them rich, thoughtful readings that engage this question. Put them in a seminar and allow them to really talk to each other. When faculty and staff have done this, one, they find it to be richly invigorating. They very much enjoy getting back to the sorts of questions that drew them into higher education in the first place, to have rich conversations with people from many different disciplines, including staff, to see staff as the educators they are. So I think something like a seminar for faculty and staff, perhaps even as part of a new faculty orientation, or perhaps a seminar that runs in the summer for faculty that might be interested in these sorts of things, is a great place to begin the conversation. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I'm so sorry. You mentioned this course, Work and Meaning.
Yes, Work and Meaning.
It was a 4-type course.
Yes, it was.
How many students present would be interested in taking a course like that at the Rock River?
Okay. It's about 10 or 12, and this is a slice of, I'm not sure, there's probably about 30 students here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'm Marcy Penner-Wilder. I'm chair of the King's Hour Committee, and on behalf of the committee and the entire King's community, I'd like to thank Tim Clydesdale for being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very
Thank you.
nice.
And thank you for your very thoughtful discussion on how to build meaning and purpose, and really how to better use the goals to achieve the goals of a liberal arts education. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is our final King's Hour event of the year, of our first King's Hour year. King's Hour was conceived by the first year pedagogy working group as a series of culturally and academically engaging events of interest to the entire King's community. As this is the last event of the year, I'd like to thank my fellow King's Hour committee members, Kendra Hardy, Craig Manelli, Doreen Van Tour, Claire Callahan, Tracy Smith-Carrier, and Allison Markin, for their tireless work to put together such a wonderful events for our inaugural year. I don't think we knew what we were getting into. But we've had Robin Doolittle's engaging discussion of the role of journalists in the age of social media, Tracy Smith-Carrier and the London Poverty Research Center's stigma busting poverty simulation that my students are still talking about, Chief Leslie White-Eye's powerful call to action regarding truth and reconciliation, and then today's wonderful event with Tim Clydesdale is an inspirational discussion of how we can transform higher education to better serve our students and lead more meaningful lives. I'm excited to announce that there will be 6 King's Hour events in the upcoming year. So if you have an idea for an event that you would like to sponsor or co-sponsor as a center, as a department, as a team, as a group, as a club, please speak to me, or you can send an email to the King's Hour and get in touch. Yes?
Can we suggest speakers?
Yes, absolutely. That's what we're looking for. Suggestions for speakers that you would like to sponsor or co-sponsor. And as always, King's Hour is a conversation, as Joe said, that begins here and continues into the classroom and beyond. Did I say you, Joe, when I was naming numbers? I might have missed one. Also, Joe. That begins here and continues into the classroom and beyond. So thank you very much for starting what I'm sure will be an engaging cross-campus discussion. Are you willing to stick around if you want? Thank you all for being here.